Hey, what is up guys? Today we're going to be going over the behavior profile of an extreme explorer. So today we're going to be using Chase Hughes' behavior compass. We're going to be basically looking at the different values, needs, and look at kind of try and uncover some hidden fears and anxieties that this man might have. And this is all just, just by looking at him through a different lens than normal. So let's see what we can figure out about this young bloke.
I became the first person this century to complete a human-powered journey from Death Valley to Denali. I got this from Iraq with Saddam Hussein on there. You've got minefields on the mountain, militia groups, and he span around.
So right away, I'm getting self. He's talking about himself a whole bunch. He's not talking about we did this, they did this, I did this, I collected this bill.
With a handgun pointed right at our chests. The following day, I found myself in a skyscraper in northern Iraq auditioning for the lead role in an.
Also, right off the bat, I'm going to go with experiences for the values, because his whole thing is doing extreme things and just, putting his life on the line for the experience. He doesn't really care about anything else, it seems, just off the first few seconds. So we'll
Iraqi chickpea commercial. That's a true story.
Oh my God.
Hi, my name's Ollie France. I'm an expedition leader and adventurer specialising in taking people through remote and hostile places all around the world. I've brought with me a load of interesting objects which I've picked.
So one positive adjective he uses is interesting. That's going to be something we can use. If we wanted to get closer to Ollie, we could use the interesting adjective.
On my travels, every one of these has got a story for me. So I'm going to go through some of these items and just share them with you today and tell some good stories from my adventures.
Deep extra.
So this is maybe not the most.
So as far as decisions go, I'm going to also put novelty. This could be wrong, but I'm going with novelty because, his whole thing is wanting new, cool, awesome, extreme adventures, and fits novelty to a T. He brings all these unique, new, novel items, so I'm going to go with novelty for that. So let's see what else.
It's an interesting object to look at, but there's definitely a story here. In 2016, I was journeying across Asia from Hong Kong to Istanbul. It was a 4-month journey, and along the way, as I hit the Uzbekistan borders Tajikistan.
Also, I'm going to put right-handed. He's got his watch on his left hand and he's gesturing a lot with his right hand, so I'm just going to assume that he's right-handed. This is just, background information. Let's see.
And I was crossing from Tajikistan. Uzbekistan at the time, it's a total police state, dictatorship, very, very strict. And I knew going into this country that I was potentially going to face problems. I had lots of warnings about it. I eventually crossed the border and they did full body search. They checked every item in my bag. They took my laptop, phone, camera, went through all the files. Eventually in my rucksack, they found cocodamol tablets, which unbeknown to me are illegal narcotics in Uzbekistan. So then I'm detained as an illegal drug trafficker in one of the world's strictest police states. Dragged off to this interrogation room, held there for 4 hours. They interrogated me and asked me to sign some papers in Russian, said it would be better for me. I had no idea what these papers said, so I said, look, I'm not going to sign that. Eventually, I said, listen, I want to speak to the British Embassy. They put me in a cell overnight at the border. When I got up in the morning, they said, you've got one phone call, you've got 3 minutes. They gave me the phone. I called the British Embassy. The British Embassy said, automatic voice message, look, it's Friday, Good Friday, and we're going to be closed until the following Tuesday. Goodbye. And that was my one phone call, back to square one. They took me down to the city of Termez on the Afghan border. Then they took me for blood and urine tests to see if I still had this supposed drug in my system, and ultimately said to me, you've got two choices. It's either a $500 fine or it's 30 days in jail. And I would go for the fine option. The difficulty was they wouldn't accept Visa and MasterCard in Uzbekistan. I couldn't get my hands on the cash. I was held for 5 days as I finally managed to get hold of the cash. When I did so, they took me to an ex-KGB compound on the outskirts of Termez near the Afghan border. Because of the denomination of Uzbek currency, I mean, this here is probably worth 50p or something. $500 worth was literally a bag full of cash, which I then took to this ex-KGB compound on the outskirts of the city. By this point, I'd been traveling for 2 months across Asia, and finally, after I paid my fine, They gave me my passport back and said, okay, you can go to the airport now and leave the country. They wanted to deport me. I'm thinking, I don't really want to go home. I want to carry on this journey. This was youthful bravado, really. Fortunately, I made friends with my interpreter. And I said to him, as he was meant to take me to the airport, I said, look, I don't want to go to the airport. I want to go to the mountains. And so he whisked me off to the mountains in a taxi for 2 hours. I sort of escaped from the police by this point, but they very soon caught up with me. I was in this remote village.
I'm also thinking he's right gestural hemisphere tendency positive. Every time he talks about something awesome and unique and extreme, like right now, he's looking to the right, he's accessing those memories. So I'm going to put right gestural hemisphere tendency.
In the mountains in Uzbekistan, and very quickly realized that I was being watched. So I had Uzbek police following me around the town. They somehow had figured out who I was and they wanted to keep a close eye on me, spying through my hotel room window. And I got such a sense of paranoia that I ended up finding my way across the whole country. I traveled for 500 miles, changing taxis in every town. Along the way, I bumped into a guy who was identical to Cristiano Ronaldo. He must be his Uzbek cousin. And he gave me this hat, this Uzbek hat. And this was his way of trying to help me blend in with the locals, which being like a 6-foot bearded Western guy, I'm not sure it really helped.
No chance.
But anyway, after about 500 miles, changing taxis in every town, I eventually made it out into Kazakhstan. But that was a wild story in Uzbekistan.
That's crazy.
Are you allowed back to Uzbekistan?
I've been back actually.
Oh, okay.
So I went back about 2 years later, and crucially, by this point, the previous leader called Karimov, who was, you know, the main sort of dictator, I suppose, in the country at the time, he'd left. So Karimov had died. And,
that's what they say about dictators left.
Yeah, he was no longer there, and so there was a new leader in place. Apparently, he'd cracked down a bit on the black market and some corruption, and actually it was fine. Although I've got to say, I was quite nervous going back. For all they knew, you know, they'd tried to deport me, and I'd just run off and escaped. All right. So I'm often asked, what do I bring home from these expeditions? I think money is actually quite interesting because every country's got one. It's very small and light, and they're all quite interesting. So over the years, every country I've been to, I've collected at least 1 or 2 banknotes from that country. I've got another interesting one. I got this from Iraq. This is an antique Iraqi banknote with Saddam Hussein on there.
Wow.
Picked that up in Erbil. I was guiding a team. We were going out to climb the highest mountain in Iraq, but I found myself out on this remote border town in Iraq. And I was going to Reki, the highest mountain in the country. Not so many people doing this, lots of dangers. You've got minefields on the mountain. You've got militia groups. It's close to the Iranian border, so that's quite sensitive. Lots of checkpoints. One evening, I found myself walking down this dark alley with my local fixer, guy in front of us, and he span around with a handgun pointed right at our chests. Totally out of the blue, totally random. It was a shock. We were too far away to grab him, and there was nowhere to sort of hide. So we just looked at this guy, stood in shock for what felt like hours. It was seconds, really. And ultimately, he waved this gun between us and then tucked it back in his pants, smiled, and carried on walking. And myself and my fixer just looked at each other like, what has just happened? The following day, I found myself in a skyscraper in northern Iraq, auditioning for the lead role in an Iraqi chickpea commercial.
How do you find yourself in this situation? The way he describes this is like, I found myself in this situation. Bro, you do not just wake up in this
That's
situation.
a true story.
Oh my God. How?
We were at this restaurant and I was about to leave the country. My fixer gets a phone call and he's nodding, looking at me and nodding and smiling. And he puts down the phone and I say, well, what's that all about? He said, I've got a cousin who works in media. He knows I work with Westerners. They're casting for the lead role in this Iraqi chickpea commercial. He wants to know if I'm with any Westerners right now and if they might be interested in auditioning for the role. And I thought, this is absolute gold. So he came along, met us at the restaurant, and he said to us, look, it's a 4-part commercial. First episode, you're walking around a market, somebody's offering you chickpeas, you taste them, you're like, And I thought, I can do that. And he said, by the 4th series of this commercial, you're hosting a party, you're offering out chickpeas and all the guests are loving it. And then next thing I know, they whisk me up a skyscraper. I'm in front of a green screen. I'm auditioning for this lead role in an Iraqi chickpea commercial. It's so bizarre. They actually wanted me to do the part. By that time, I was already on the plane home, so it didn't quite work out. This is from Siberia. So I was extremely lucky to find this knife. I was doing a big solo expedition in 2020 across Lake Baikal in Siberia. Lake Baikal is the world's largest freshwater lake, 400 miles long, 1 mile deep, so large that it contains around almost a quarter of the world's fresh water, which is astonishing fact. Every winter, with its location in Siberia, the surface of this lake freezes in this incredible blue ice with cracks and bubbles, and I wanted to go out there to complete this expedition. And it's incredibly remote, particularly in the northern part of the lake. One day I was walking along, about day 10. You do get a few vehicle tracks on the lake, so you get local people going out fishing. And underneath my feet, walking along one day, listening to some music, I saw this lying on the ice, just there in front of me. Absolutely incredible. I think it's a fish knife, so it would be used for filleting fish. I think it's a walnut handle with a small engraving. I'm not sure what that says. So it's this incredible handmade knife. What I suspect happened, probably a fisherman has had it on the roof of his car after fishing out there and driven off. And so I picked it up, put it in the sled, and here it is. I was solo on the lake, so completely solo and unsupported. Everything I needed on the lake for 16 days I had within my sled. To do that, I needed to have local fixes and local information, local advice. You know, you could potentially go through this ice, you could get yourself in real trouble, it's extremely remote. And so I'd planned it really, really carefully. I'd thought about every single detail. I realized that if I was to get a helicopter for a rescue, you couldn't pay by card. They would only come and rescue you if you had a big stack of Russian rubles. And the last conversation I had before stepping foot onto this ice was with a local fixer. As I was tracing my finger across the map and I got a quarter of the way through, he looked at it and said, in this region you've got thermal waters underneath the lake and that melts the ice from below. And last year somebody had fallen through that section of ice and been killed. And if I hadn't have spoken to him before stepping foot on the ice, I would have gone straight through that area and potentially could have gone in myself. Yeah. The air temperature is -20. If you go through the ice and climb out of the ice, manage to climb out on your own, which I was, everything is going to be frozen solid. Here I've got, this is a summit marker, which is seen on the summit of Denali, which is the highest point in North America. This is exactly what you will see on the summit, so that marks the height of the mountain. Here you can see clearly an Alaskan number plate, and this is a bullet, and this is all an empty bullet shell, I should say. And these were all acquired on my latest expedition, which was my biggest, boldest, hardest expedition yet, where I traveled from Death Valley to Denali, the lowest point in North America, to the highest, entirely by human power. So this was a 10-year dream to complete this expedition.
Wow,
and it took years and years to think about whether it's possible, 18 months to finally plan it, and then it was a 64-day expedition. Set off from Death Valley on my own, on a fully loaded bike, 50 kilograms, cycling around 90 to 100 miles a day, all the way up to Alaska, from baking hot temperatures in Death Valley, way up to freezing blizzards in Alaska. Once I finally reached Denali National Parks after 6 weeks of cycling, 3,500 miles, I then began the long trek into Denali.
I think we're finally getting some of the way that he describes his environment. So he talked about blazing hot. He does talk about some things like the engravings and the knife and the things that he feels. So I'm going to go with kinesthetic. I was leaning a little bit towards auditory because he would talk about conversations and stuff. Say like I heard from the locals or things like that, but I feel like they're kind of competing pretty good, these two, but I think he leans a little bit more towards kinesthetic. And then I also want to say he's a significance-driven person because he does really amp up these stories. I feel like he wants to, give off that essence that you can't kind of overlook him because, he's done all of these really cool things and he has all of these cool memories. I would go with significance there. And for external and internal locus of control, I also want to say that he's an internal locus of control. He does say a few things that are like, I got holed up and there was like problems with the bank. But overall, he does say that he took care of it because he had to. It was inside of his control after all. So I do like
The
that, but
base
we really have not gotten anything. This is a very positive man. I don't really think I've picked up on anything negative. Maybe I missed
camp.
some things, but let's
So
see.
Denali National Park, huge area of wilderness and mountains. 99% of people climbing Denali will fly into the base camp, which is located underneath the summit by a ski plane. They'll fly into the glacier there. For me to do it human powered, we needed to ski in. So I brought a team together of incredible individuals, very, very experienced, elite individuals. And we then skied for 8 days through backcountry, through bear country, crossing freezing rivers, navigating crevasses, avalanches, in order just to make it to base camp, and then climb what is widely considered the coldest, windiest mountain on Earth. Over
Nice talking about
6,000
like temperatures and
meters,
stuff.
incredibly stormy, very, very challenging logistically, physically. And so the story behind these, I mean, this is a replica from the summit. Eventually, after 64 days, we did reach the summit. I became the first person this century to complete a human-powered journey from Death Valley to Denali. This I found on the roadside, and I just had to keep it in Alaska. And then this, we had several layers of bear protection with us on the mountain. We had bear spray, we had a flare gun, we had an electric bear fence, and then finally, as a last case measure, we had a revolver. We did shoot off a
Yeah, so I would say that's internal locus of control, demonstrating the things that he brought to protect himself from bears. Not like, oh, I didn't know where the bears. Some people have external locus of control, and they'll think that things are outside of their control. So, for instance, like if you wanted to figure out if somebody had an external locus of control really quickly, you would ask them, oh, how do you normally get sick? A person with internal locus of control will say something like, oh, I didn't wash my hands enough. I didn't eat right, I ate bad things, stuff like that. But an external locus of control person will be like, oh my God, the weather, the allergies, the weather is so bad these days, and kids just don't know how to, keep their hands to themselves. So that's one super good way to find out if somebody's external locus of control.
few rounds just to frighten off any bears after we found grizzly prints 20 meters from our tent one night, just to help us get a good night's sleep. Where I was cycling in North America, it's known as the Serengeti of the North. You've got black bears, brown bears, moose, wolves, mountain lions, elk. And I'm out there cycling on my own in very remote regions, in bear country, in spring, when they're coming out of hibernation, feeling hungry, hoping I'm not going to be their first meal. Also, I'm colorblind, so a brown bear in green trees isn't going to stand out very much. So I had to have a bit of protection with me.
And they're actually faster than you think.
Bears can run at about 35 miles an hour. I'm not outrunning a bear in full sprint on my heavy expedition bike. That's just not going to happen. But what I did do, I learned as much as possible about defending yourself against bears. Black bears are lower down the sort of food chain. The brown bears are the apex predator, the grizzlies. And so if you, to a grizzly bear, try and intimidate it, try and shout at it, it might think, well, I'm going to show you who's boss. Whereas a black bear, they're one step lower on the food chain, as it were. Black bears are known as man-eaters. They do eat fresh meat, whereas a brown bear would only eat rotten meat. So if a black bear did get hold of you and take you down,
Chatting about bears, so
they could potentially eat you there and then. A brown bear, what that would do is dig a hole, try and bury you, and then come back when you're rotten and eat you then. The idea is you play dead, let it bury you, and then crawl away if you have the chance.
I don't think we found really anything negative of him saying anything negative. That is very positive. This is a very positive man. Maybe he said something bad about, being stuck. No, he really didn't. Wow. This guy is a very positive man.
I'm not
We didn't
sure.
get anything negative about him. Maybe I missed something. If you have a comment, if you caught something that I missed, please let me know so I can get better and we can all get better as a community, which is awesome. So this is my behavior compass of this beautiful young gentleman. Very, very unique. Lots of interesting, different things that he's done. So just a key takeaway. So for the values, because he's an experience-oriented man, if you wanted to really connect with him, you would talk about things like, going out on experiences, doing something new because he likes novelty. Like, let's go do this new adventure. Let's go have this new experience. So one thing I've noticed with, people that are in sales is they won't take into account, person's values and what they actually want. They will just stick to their normal script. But if you wanted to become a really good salesman, you wanted to become really good at persuasion and influence, you would want to talk about things like experience, new experiences, talk about lean to his right on the gestural hemisphere tendency, because these kinds of things are going to give you that influence and persuasion that you want in your day-to-day life. So that's all I have for today. It wasn't really that interesting, I'm going to be honest, but it looked a little bit more interesting just by looking at it because he's such a unique, eccentric individual. But yeah, if you have any disagreements, agreements, please let me know in the comments below, and catch you later.